Presser in memory of his wife Chayalea Basev HaKohen. The children and grandchildren of Vicky and Larry Fish in their living honor. Rebecca Witansky Suis and Susan Witansky in memory of Rebecca's uncle and Lewis's brother, Pesa ben Yosef. Week of Learning, Yossi and Sippy Peleg in memory of his mother, Sprinza Bas Yakiva. Marcia and Gary Schrager in memory of her father, Shmuel ben Meir. What's today's date? 29th. A day of learning plus Torah fun. Judy Fuchs in memory of her sister, Cyril Bas Eliyahu. Judy and Bob Thaler in memory of her mother, Hannah Bas Dov. Ernie Bloom in memory of his father, Binyamin ben Moshe Cohen. Silky, wait a minute, it's 29th. That's it. Okay. Where is everybody?
They're crossing the Yamsu. Then Shabbat. They're coming.
Harvey, you said your wife is not. The list has you and doesn't have your wife.
Yeah, well, she didn't go to the hospital for Friday.
Well, she could be not. You don't have to be hospitalized to be on the list.
I know.
All right. So, what's your wife's name?
Shana. That's mine. So it's what?
Shana. Yeah. Does
Shana
she have a mother?
Soraliba.
Shana Bas.
Shana Ganessa Bas.
Shana Ganessa
Bas.
Okay. We are dedicating the learning this morning to a refuah shalema for Shana Ganessa Bas Sora Liba. That's Harvey's spouse, who was recently became hospitalized. All right. So the topic on the table is what gender is a androgynous? And we had opinions ranging from Reb Yossi and Reb Shimon in the Mishnah, saying that if an androgynous marries a woman, he's 100% male, and therefore the wife, if he's a Kohen, can eat truma. And it ranged to the Tanna Kama, who says that if an androgynous, who he also agrees is 100% male, because if an androgynous marries a man, and according to the Tanna Kama, and the man engages in intimacy, either kedarko or shaloi kedarko, you get misa skila. And the last opinion was Reb Eliezer, who says you get skila only if it's shalo kedarko, but if it's kedarko, it's pater avalaser. So all those seem to be telling us that an androgynous is considered a male. However, now we're at the bottom, the last word, so you don't even have to do it. What? Pei Beis, Omid Beis, the last two words. So just go to Pei Gimel.
Thank you.
Omer Rav. Rav says as follows. Leisa mas nisan. Forget about our Mishnah when it comes to Reb Yossi. Remember, in the Mishnah, it said Reb Yossi and Reb Shimon said that if an androgynous marries a lady, the wife he's so much a male that if he's a Kohen, his wife, it's so valid a marriage that she can even eat truma. Then we had an issue about whether she can eat shazav achok, but basically, at least midrabanan, she could eat truma midrabanan. Truma, all truma today is midrabanan, and so she could eat truma. But now we're learning, according to Rav, that the Mishnah is we should literally tear up this Mishnah. Okay? Medekame Brisa, and we should replace it with a brisa, which is very weird because Rebbe chose Mishnayos as more authoritative than brises. If we recall, every time there's a stira between a Mishnah and a brisa, what? We struggle to resolve the difficulty, but we don't tear up the Mishnah. But here we're saying, since the brisa and the Mishnah are irreconcilable, and we have to flip a coin, we're going to stick with the brisa and forget about the Mishnah. That's what we're saying. To Sanya, what brisa are we talking about? Now, interestingly, please note that Reb Shimon is no longer here in the brisa. Okay? Reb Yossi Omer, androgynous beria bifnei atzmahu. In the brisa, Reb Yossi is a standalone statement. He no longer is partnered with Reb Shimon. And he said an androgynous is not male and it's not female. It's an it. There's a he, a she, and an it. It's a beria bifnei atzmai. The Chachamim disagree with Reb Yossi. All right. V'lo hikiro bo Chachamim im zachar im nekeva. The rabbis say that's ridiculous. There is no third gender. The only problem is, based on the physical evidence, we can't figure out whether an androgynous is male or female. So this brisa is utterly contradictory to the statements in the Mishnah, where in various ways they make the definitive statement that an androgynous is halachically considered a male. Yes, sir.
This one to be a Mishnah.
Correct.
To be the brisa.
Correct.
Why are we not?
Correct. That's what the Gemara is going to say now.
Right.
Okay. Adarabba. Well, you guys got your, all right, I'm loosely translating it. You got your head wedged. Listen to Lebraisa, Makaime Masnisan. Ignore the brisa if it can't be reconciled and stick with the Mishnah. That's normal behavior. So the Gemara says, yeah, but there's textual evidence that Reb Yossi changed his mind and that the brisa is historically happened after the Mishnah, and he, in full light of what he reported in the Mishnah, he changed his mind and he reported the brisa. The Gemara says, "The shavke Rabbi Yossi lebar zuge." Since Rabbi Yossi dropped Rabbi Shimon, he no longer is paired with Rabbi Shimon. Shmami na hader bey. See that his statement in the Mishnah is an earlier statement, and he changed his mind, and he couldn't talk Rav Shimon into agreeing with him, so he went out on a limb and he made his statement in the brisa as a standalone. Now, Shmuel absolutely agrees with you. Shmuel says, Shmuel's Omar, he says, "Lei say lebraisa makaime masnisan." When you have a conflict between the brisa and the Mishnah, I don't care historical data, it was later. I don't care Rabbi Yossi changed his mind. Rebbe was later than both of them. And Rebbe went with the Mishnah. So we stick with the Mishnah. So Gemara is not happy with that either. Adarabba, let's go the other way around. Reb Shmuel, not Reb Shmuel, Shmuel, based on his normal attitude to way you paskin things, should stick with the brisa and ignore the Mishnah. Why? When there is, let's say, a given Mishnah that has the Rabbanan saying a kula and a Das Yachid saying a chumrah, Shmuel's position is, when in doubt, throw it out. In other words, where there's the majority opinion is Lakula, but there is a Das Yachid who goes Lachumra. He said that no harm, no foul if you go Lachumra. But what if so you just didn't do whatever it was? So in this case, where Rabbi Yossi now says we do not consider him a male, we should stick with Shmuel should stick with Rabbi Yossi Lechumra and say he can't marry a woman or a man. That's his normal behavior. Hanimili lo misakromas nisan. So the Gemara answers that we stick with Shmuel would tend to go lechumra if both opinions are in a Mishnah. But if you have to upchug a Mishnah in order to come up with the chumra, that you don't do. Aval ki ma'akre masnisin lo chayish. If the only way you can stick with the chumra is to actually tear up a Mishnah, Shmuel would not go that far. So at this point, we seem to be restoring the legitimacy of the Mishnah, but at least we've now raised issues about the androgynous. And now we're going to take like a side venture. And we're going to, Rav is going to say, there are circumstances, specifically 2 times, where we stick with Rabbi Yossi. And Shmuel is going to say, I agree with you. There are 2 times where we stick with Rabbi Yossi, but he's going to give 2 totally different dinim. Right. So that's the background of what's going to, and then they're going to ask, why did Shmuel have to disagree with Rav? If they both have a Messiah, we paskin like Rabbi Yossi 2 times, why did they not agree on the 2 times? That's going to be the next discussion, okay? Amre Bey de Rav Mishmei de Rav. In Rav's yeshiva, meaning in Pumpadisa, they say in the name of Rav, Halacha Rabbi Yossi be'androgynous u behar kava. We paskin like Rabbi Yossi when it comes to canon androgynous get married. And depending on whether you hold by the Brisa or the Mishnah, okay, it would be a different psak. And we also paskin like Rabbi Yossi with regard to propagating trees in the time frame immediately preceding a Shemitah year. Okay, Ushmuel Aimar, Shmuel says we agree with Rabbi Yossi in 2 occasions, Bekushi, with regard to the bleeding a woman experiences incident to childbirth, and the bleeding a woman experiences incident to being a zava. Rabbi Yossi makes a determination in that instance, which is childbirth and which is zava, and halachas are very different. And also, Bekidush, with regard to animals that may be sanctified to become korbanos or swapped out for other animals, a tamura, etc., etc. Okay. Now we're going to spell out what these points are and why Shmuel and Rav disagree. Pardon me?
What do these other issues have to do?
They were discussing Shmuel and Rav disagree with this androgynous issue. Right. So now we're finding out how we know that. You can't just say Shmuel and Rav disagree. You have to bring textual evidence. And whenever we do this all the time, whenever we bring textual evidence, the textual evidence is 3 words in the middle of a 58-word brisa. So they display the whole brisa. That's just the Gemara style.
What about the kula? If you have a kula and a chumrah,
but that's not the issue. The issue is, how do I know Shmuel holds this way and Rav holds that way. We just said that. We said Rav says that we hold like the Brisa in Rabbi Yossi, and Shmuel says we don't. And now, how do we know that? So now we're going to learn the rest of the machlokes and the different stadim that the two early Amoraim take. Okay, that's just the Gemara style. So androgynous hudamrina. We just talked out the androgynous issue. Do we go with the Brisa? Do we go with the Mishnah? Rav says we go with the Brisa. Shmuel says we go with the Mishnah. Harv Chava to Tanan. What about the grafting issue, propagating trees? Ein nineteen vien marivin, vien marchirivin erev shvius. You cannot plant a tree. That means uproot. You bring a seed like a apple seed. You grow a little bitty apple tree, and now you transplant it to the orchard where it's going to be. You cannot take this little sapling and plant it in the orchard. Number two, you can't take a branch of those trees that it works with and trim the tip of the branch and stick it in the ground and it'll root. And then at some later point, you cut them apart and lo and behold, you have two trees. That's the second technique for propagating an orchard, okay? And the third case, you cannot cut a notch in rootstock and then affix a branch from a different tree into that rootstock. That's grafting. Okay, well, I'm trying to, in case nobody knew what the word grafting means. I thought graft is when the politician takes my money and doesn't vote the way I want it. Okay, so now just a side note. If you take a peach rootstock and graft an apple to it, that's asur d'oraisa. But if you take an apple and graft it to an apple, they did it with grapes when there was this disease in France. They took U.S. roots from grapes and grafted the fancy French plants onto it. That's not asur. That's mutter. So you can't use these various transplanting or causing a shoot to grow or grafting, all of these things, erev shvius. Okay, now what does it mean, erev shvius? So a Tanakama says, Pachos mishloshim yom lifnei Rosh Hashanah, for the entire month of Elul prior to Rosh Hashanah, the presumption being that if it's going to work, it could take as long as 30 days to work. Okay? The imnota hevrich the hechriv, if you did transplant a tree or bend the branch or here chiv or graft the thing, you have to undo it. You have to tear it out. Okay, that's the Tanakama. Rav Yehuda Omer call Hirchva she'einun kailetis b'shloisha yamim shuvein kailetis. Rav Yehuda says, if the graft, that, where you cut the notch and stuck the tree in, doesn't take within the first 3 days after you do it, it's never gonna take. Okay? Rabbi Yossi, here's now Rabbi Yossi, he's the grafting case that Rabbi Yossi is reporting. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Shimon Imrim, Shtei Shvuos, if it doesn't work within 2 weeks, it ain't gonna work. Okay? The Omer Reb Nachman, Omer Rava Baravua, he says, L'divrei ha'omer shloishim. What's the halachic implication of this dispute? According to the Tanakama, who says it 30 days rule, tzorech shloishim v'shloishim. Elul is not allowed completely. According to the 30-day rule, it's 30 days before Rosh Chodesh Elul. L'divrei ha'omer shloisha, according to Reb Yehuda, who says it's a 3-day deal. Tzarich shlosha v'shloishim. It's 3 days before Rosh Chodesh Elul. L'divrei ha'omer shtei shvuos, according to Reb Yossi and Reb Shimon, who say it's a 2-week thing. Tzarich shtei shvuos l'shloishim. It's 2 weeks prior to Rosh Chodesh Elul. That's the grafting case that Rav says we go like Rabbi Yossi. Okay? Now, Ushmuel Omer bekushi ubekiddush. Shmuel says, no, that's not the 2 dinim we agree with Rabbi Yossi. The 2 dinim we agree with Rabbi Yossi is a lady bleeding when she gives birth and a animal designated to be a korban. And here's his case, okay? Kushi Titanan, the blood associated with labor, Kama Ye Kushuya, how prior to the emergence of the baby, late in a pregnancy, a woman can spot, she can have false labor. The labor itself can extend over a period of days. We learned earlier, sometimes the baby climbs back in and it went for a whole week. So it's not such a pashut zach, the woman's going to have 4 hours for labor. So what about spotting in the days prior to her actually having the baby? Okay, that's the question. Reb Meir Omer, O Arba'im O Chamishim Yom. He says spotting even 40 or 50 days prior to the actual birth can be attributed to the birthing process, and she's not a Zava. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Daya Chodja. He says the month of the birth. So and I'm not 100% sure if it means if the baby's born in Nisan, bleeding in Nisan, or if it means 29 days prior to the birth. Okay? And Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon, here's Rabbi Yossi, and notice he's partnered with Rabbi Shimon again. Ein kushya yoser mishtei shvuos. 2 weeks. If she spots 17 days before the baby's born, she's a Zava. If she spots 13 days before the baby's born, that she's a Yoledes. And the halachas are different. That's the case of bleeding. Now, the case of animals, and you're going to see why this is relevant. Kiddush, rendering an animal unfit to be a korban. The Tanan, we have the following brisa. It's going to be a long brisa, and first it's going to talk about kalayim before it ever gets to animals. But so just hold cup. Ha mesakech gafno al gave tvuaso shel chaverai. Reuven has a wheat field. I plant a vine in my property next door to his wheat field, but I don't stake the vines or build a fence or something. And my vine sticks out over his wheat to create a kalayim circumstance. So what's the deal? Okay, Hareze Kidesh, his wheat, it has to be separated, meaning it's asur bahano, it's klayim. However, v'chayev be'acharusai, but I have to pay him for the damage I've caused that he can't harvest that wheat. Okay, that divrei Reb Meir, that's Reb Meir. Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Shimon, here's Rabbi Yossi, they say, Ein Adam Oiser Divrei She'eino Shaloi. I can't ruin his wheat field by my planting, and that for even though my vines overhang his grain, it's not Kalayim vis-a-vis his grain, and he can do what he wants with it. Okay, so that's the case. Now, they interrupt that, and so those are the dinner. Okay, now, the Kiddush in that case meant separate, because the word Kodesh means to separate. A word for a woman of ill repute is a Kadesha. On the other hand, the woman who you marry is Kedushin. In both cases, she's separated from the Olam. One she can't marry in, and the other she can't be with other people. We make Kiddush on Friday night. We separate Shabbos from the rest of the days. So the word Kiddush literally means to separate, and here Kiddush meant separate those grapes, those wheat plants under the grapes. So those are the two cases. Now, Iboilahu, they asked, but androgynous, my li Aimer Shmuel. Since Shmuel does not agree with Rav, with Rabbi Yossi, with regard to androgynous, and we had two opinions earlier, does he go lechumra or doesn't he, with regard to the androgynous? We want to clarify what Shmuel might have said. Tashma, let's look into it. The Omer Shmuel, the Rav Anan, Shmuel commented to Rav Anan, Leise lebraisa makme masnisin. We ignore the brisa and stick with the Mishnah. Okay, so he would say an androgynous is clearly a male. Chava Mali Omer Shmuel. When it comes to the grafting Inyan, how many days before Shemitah you can do your final graft, right? Or a branch or whatever. Tashma, let's look into that. The Amr le Shmuel Rav Anan. Shmuel reported to Rav Anan. Tani Commander Omer Shloisha V'Shloishim. I go with Rabbi Yehuda 3 and 30. Okay? Now, that takes care of Shmuel and his dispute with Rav. What about Rav and his dispute with Shmuel? Kushe Maili Omer Rav. What might Rav have answered with regard to childbirth blood? Tiku. We can't find anywhere a proof to how Rav would paskin in terms of how many days prior to the actual emergence of the baby is it attributed to birth and not to Zava. Kiddush Mali Omer Rav. What about the separation issue? How would Rav paskin? So there we do have a raya. Omer Rav Yosef Tashma, let's look into it. The Omer Rav Huna Omer Rav. Rav Huna reports in the name of Rav and halacha Rabbi Yossi. We do not agree with Rabbi Yossi, who was the one who said that I can't ruin Reuven's field. Okay, and he said we do not paskin la Rabbi Yossi. Omelei Abaya, my chazis, the samchat aha. How do you know that Rav does not agree with Rabbi Yossi? In other words, is this just your opinion, or do you have a raya? Samachaha. Let's take the following Inyan and try to figure it out. The Omer Rav Ada Omer Rav. Rav Ada says in the name of Rav, halacha Rabbi Yossi. He totally disagrees with Rabbi Yosef. Okay, and he says we do hold like Rabbi Yossi. Amre Beit Rav Manu. So in the yeshiva of, in the yeshiva, we learned earlier, if you go back, it said in the yeshiva of Rav, they say. Now the Gemara wants to know, Amre Be Rav Manu. Who is the they that Brisa was talking about? So the answer is that's Rav Huna. Rav Huna Omer ein halacha. And Rav Huna is the one who said we do not hold like Rabbi Yossi. Okay, so that's the answer. Okay. Now we're going to go back to the Mishnah. We're pretty much finished with androgynous, and now we're going back to the Mishnah. And they mentioned also a tumtum in the Mishnah. Rav Yehuda Omer tumtum. He said a tumtum who has surgery and he's determined to have male equipment is considered a sris chama, and he's not supposed to, at least lechatchila, do yibum or chalitza. He should let one of his other brothers do it. And then there was an issue if he's the only surviving brother, is she free to marry anyone else, or does she need chalitza? But now we're simply talking about how do we say? The Mishnah made a blanket statement that a tumtum who is determined to have male equipment is considered a sris chama. So now we're going to challenge that presumption. Okay? Rav Yehuda Omer tumtum is a sris chama. Omer Rav Ami my avid le Rav Yehuda le tumtum de biri. What would Rav Yehuda do in the world famous case of the tumtum in biri? The usbu ha'ave kurse the ikra. It means he sat on a special chair and they cut him. In other words, he went into surgery. He had urological surgery, and he was determined to have male organs under the membrane that made us unable to determine. And the eyelid Sheva, he got married and he had 7 sons. So this is a pretty strong evidence that this guy is not particularly a sris chama. He was pretty functional. So Rabbi Yehuda would say, Chayzer al banav mayin. Go take a look at these kids. And you'll notice this one looks like Schwartz, and that one looks like Abramowitz, and that one looks like Kaplan. That there are a series. As far as Rabbi Yehuda, I'm not backing down. That Mrs. Beery was pretty active outside of the home. That's his answer.
Wow.
So I just okay. And that's what I just said is Rashi's opinion. I'd like to add my own comment that I can't really fathom how Beery, we're talking about a 10-year period. She's having all these kids. If Beery isn't functional, and we had tests, we had various tests, the force with which ejaculation occurs, the way you urinate. There were all these tests. If there was a suspicion about Beery, by the time you get to the 3rd, 4th kid, it's pretty hard to comprehend how this happened. That's just my own note. I'm obviously an epicurus, but that's my own note. All right? Okay. Now we're going into this in further detail regarding the current halacha, so to speak. Tanya, Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda Omer. Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda. Now, Rabbi Yehuda is the one who would not accept even the vaguest possibility that a tumkum could father children, right? He'd rather call them mamzerim than say, well, maybe I was wrong. But his son says, tumtum lo yachalitz, a tumtum, this is pre-surgery. Assuming the tumtum has siblings, the tumtum should stand aside and let one of his other siblings do chalitza with the widow of the dead brother. Shema yekore v'nimtza sris chama, because maybe when they cut him open, he would turn out to be a man but be a srischama. So he entertains the possibility that his father might be right. Okay? So now the Gemara says, just a minute. If you're doing the chalitza prior to the surgery on the tumtum, who says it's going to be a man altogether? Maybe it's going to be a lady. Atu kol mikra zocher have. Every time you surgically reveal what's under there, it's going to turn out to be a male? Obviously not. They're going to, some of them, 50-50, 30-70, who knows? But some of them are going to turn out to be women. Hachi Kamar, here's what Rabbi Yosu is saying.
Wait, just 1 second. Are we saying that when we examine the person, we can tell he's a Suriskama without the test?
No, we're saying that if a person is born with some kind of skin or membranes obscuring his external genitalia,
Right.
and we do surgery, and we determine him to be a male,
Because
they cut him open, he's got male equipment.
Only male organ.
Okay. Yeah, but he's not an androgynous, he's a tumtum. So now, is that person capable of fathering children? Rabbi Yehuda says absolutely not. And if he gets married and he does have children,
But again,
they ain't his.
by virtue of the fact that
By virtue of the fact that he was genetically incorrect at birth, that we make the assumption that the rest of his equipment is similarly incorrect. Okay? That's Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda's son is going to somewhat disagree with Tati. Okay, he's going to say, Hachi Kamar, here's what Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Yehuda is saying. Shema Yakora, maybe he'll be cut open, the Nimtza Nekeva. Maybe he'll turn out to be a girl, and therefore, a woman. And therefore, he can't do chalitza, obviously. A woman can't do chalitza with another woman. And even if you do surgery and he turns out to have male equipment, maybe, since there were issues with him at birth of having normal equipment, maybe even after surgery, the revealed equipment is also not normal. So he disagrees with his father on the absolutism of his father's position, but he does entertain the possibility that a tumtum may be fertile or may not be fertile. Since we can't determine that until after several years of marriage, in many cases, we'll let another brother deal with the widow. That's Reb Yehuda's Reb Yosef or Reb Yehuda's position. Omerava lipso b'makam achim. Here we say that we're talking about the Yavama where there are other brothers. V'chalutz shelo b'makam achim. That we say this guy, this tumtum, he's also taking sort of a compromised position. If there are other brothers around, let's not worry about the tumtum. Let him go to the movies, and another brother will either marry or do chalitza. But if there are no other brothers, then we want to say that's that he does do chalitza, even though we don't know what he is, and even though he might be a woman, just so that we have like a public event where the Zika is broken and the woman can go about her life and not get rumors that she's engaging in znus when she marries someone else.
What if he does surgery after chalitza?
And he turns out to be a woman?
Yeah.
Then he's the only brother. So she was free to marry anybody. And the chalitza is meaningless. All that happened was she gave him the boot. It wasn't really chalitza. It's not an issue. Okay. Now we're
When you say give him the boot, you mean the chalitza shoe?
chalitza shoe. I use that expression because she literally, he takes her shoe off and then she spits at him. So she gave him the boot. I mean, I just love that expression, and that's the. I've been criticized for my less than polished delivery with things like that, but I can't resist giving the boot. Okay. All right, now we're going. I said for the most part we dealt with an androgynous, but we're back. Okay, and in our Mishnah, we had the Tanakama, who apparently says that Kedarko, Shalo Kedarko. Remember, the androgynous has both male and female equipment. If a male gets together with the androgynous, chas v'shalom, he could utilize the androgynous's female equipment, or he could Shalo Kedarko. Okay, that's the new discussion and the consequences thereof. Omer of Shmuel bar Yehuda, Omer of Ava, Achuva de Rebbe Yehuda bar Zivdi. Rav Shmuel, the son of Yehuda, says in the name of Rav Abba, the brother of a different Rav Yehuda, Omer Rav Yehuda, Omer Rav. The original Rav Yehuda says in the name of Rav, Androgynous chayavin alav skila b'shtei mekaymas. Doesn't matter whether the partner uses the female component of the androgynous or he goes shalo kedarko, they both get skila, assuming there was hasrod, or all the rules. Okay, so meisvei. Okay, so androgynous chayavin alav skila b'shtei mekaymas. Categorical. Doesn't matter any relationship between androgynous and a male. He's at least significantly enough a male that they're both chayiv misa. Okay, meisvei. We're going to argue with that. A brisa. Rav Eliezer Reimer, androgynous chayav and alav skila kezacher. If the man and the androgynous go shalo kedarko, which would be the same way two perfectly normally outfitted males would have to do it if they were trying to be intimate, then they're chayiv misa. What are we talking about? When the other partner treats the androgynous as if it's a male and it's shaloi kedarko, avo b'nekevas shalo potter. But if the male partner exclusively treats the androgynous as a female, then that's potter. He's not chayiv misa. They weren't allowed to get married, but it's not chayiv misa. Okay, that's what Rebbe Lazar says. Hu da Omer ki haitana. Now Rav, when he talks about this issue, he cites the following brisa, the Sanya, Rav Simai Omer, androgynous chayavin alav skila b'shtei kaimais. Doesn't matter what technique the two people use. A male with an androgynous both of them are chayav skila. Okay, my time at the Rav Simai. What is the Torah basis for Rav Simai saying? Doesn't matter how they do it, they're chayav misa. Okay? So Rava explains, Omar Rava bar hamduri asborali. a fellow named Bar Hamduri, I don't recall meeting him before, explained how you darshan the pasuk to come up with either way you're chayiv misa. Okay? The pasuk says, VS Zachar and S, which is untranslatable, a male. Lo tishkav michshave isha, should not have sex with a man the way you might have sex with a woman. And then the pasuk goes on to say, having sex with a man. So it's a long pasuk with various phrases and extra material. A man with a man, why does it introduce a woman? What's the first S doing there? Why does the pasuk at the end say having sex with a man if we just said you can't have sex with a man? So all of those things are now going to be explained by Rav Hamduri. Okay? Yesh lo shtei mishkavos. We met what? Man. Okay, so we'll take the first question. A man can't have sex with a man the way he might have sex with a woman. What possible male could there possibly be where there is at least the theoretical possibility of having sex with him the way you would have sex with a woman? An androgynous.
Well, they didn't talk about oral sex.
They didn't know about oral sex.
I'm sure they knew it. They
didn't know about it. There is
maybe
no.
they're hinting here because Sagi knows.
There is no place in the Chumash. There is no place in Shulchan Aruch. That issue never comes up. It was so beyond their thought process that you just couldn't. How could you do such a thing? First of all, they didn't have the level of hygiene we have.
Right.
It would be disgusting. I don't know. All right. That's the best I can do for you. In any event, what kind of person could you have two possibilities with? Hari Omer androgynous. So we have to now interpret this pasuk as not prohibiting homosexuality. It prohibits a male having a relationship with an androgynous. That's what the pasuk says. V'Rabbanan, how do the rabbis deal with saying that the androgynous is only chayav misa with his partner if they engage in shalom kedarko? Even though there were theoretically two possibilities, es zachaksiv. It says like a male. And the only way a male can have sex with another male is shalom kedarko. V'Rabbanan. So how do the rabbis learn normal homosexuality is asur d'oraisa and you're over skila? Zachar greda menolahu. How do we know that normal masculine sexual activity would be forbidden? Now you have to look. You have to change the words. The Gemara is a little bit corrupt here, so I'll read it the way they adjust it. May S. You learn it from that first S. The first S is a reboy, and it includes regular homosexuality. Now, the Isha Shalo Kedarka Menalahu. We've said all along that having sex with a woman, Shalo Kedarko, you would be kind of her if we were the Yibum, right? And we've talked about on various occasions, Kedarko, Shalo Kedarko. How do you know that definitionally male with a woman, but not vaginally, is considered a sexual relationship? How do we learn that? So the Gemara says, "Me isha." The pasuk had don't have sex with a man like you would with a woman. So it's turning it around and it's saying don't that if you have sex with a woman like you would have to have if you're going to have with a man, that's also called sex. Okay? So now we learn all these dinim, not to be with an androgynous, not to be with another man. And if it's a woman and you do it, shalom kadarko, it's still considered doing it. Okay, all those things from that one pasuk because of its expansive wording. Okay, now we're back to Rav Elazar saying that an androgynous is a male and you get skila, right? Omar Rav Shizvi, Omar Rav Chisda, he asks the following question. Lo lachol Omar Rav Eliezer androgynous zachar ma'al yehi. Rav Eliezer does not consider an androgynous to be 100% male in every single conceivable circumstance where that issue might arise. Okay? If you do say that an androgynous is a male, end of question, what about the mikdoshin? What about when you take an animal and you're makdish it to be a korban? Okay? Yakdish. Then an androgynous animal, if it's considered 100% male, certain korbanos you have to use a male. Certain korbanos you have to use a female. Other korbanos you flip a coin, you have your choice. If you took an androgynous animal and made it a male sacrifice, if it's a male in all regards, that should be fine. Yet we have a brisa, Tana Rabbanan, and the brisa, again, we're going to do a lot of stuff before we get to the line that counts, okay? Hanirba, if you have a bird that a human being had sex with, you cannot use that bird as a korban. Vahamukta, or the bird was designated to be an object of avodah zarah. The evod, or it actually was used for avodah zarah. Vahasnan, or the bird was traded for sex with a prostitute. Vahamachir, or the bird was traded for a puppy. You all these birds you can't, the Kohen can't do malika with. Okay, the tumtum, or a bird or an animal. Now we're shifting from birds to animal. Oh, we're still no.
Oh, yes.
All right. Anyway, or a tumtum, or an androgynous. All of these critters would be mitame begadim abes habilia. If the Kohen does malika on any of these animals, then the Kohen's clothing becomes tameh. Okay, Rebbe Eliezer Aimer, tumtum v'androgynous ein mitamin begadim abes ablia. Rebbe Eliezer says that the tumtum and the androgynous would not be mitame. Why? These are animals now. Why? The Shahaya Rebbe Eliezer Aimer, he used to say frequently, Kol makom shenemer zachar v'nekeva. This is the part that's critical to us. Whenever the Torah stipulates that a korban should be male or should be female, atamaitzi tumtum v'adrogenis shebenehem, we would exclude an animal that has no discernible genitalia or that has too many genitalia. Okay? But I'm going back to the bird, uba'oif. But with regard to a bird, it talks about a young, this kind of bird, or a year old, that kind of bird, but it never talks about a male or a female bird. So Hail the low Omar by Zachar Nekeva, since with regard to birds, we never stipulate to have to be male or female. We do not disqualify a tumtum or an androgynous bird because it doesn't matter what sex it is, even if it has none or too much. Okay, so here we see that Rebbe Eliezer says with regarding behemoths that are used for korbanos, an androgynous is not a male. And that's the proof that he doesn't say it in every single conceivable case. All right, next deal. I'm going to try to go to the Mishnah, so you only have to bring one book tomorrow. Omer of Nachman bar Yitzchak, Af Ana Nami Tanina. We also have the same concept. What are you doing with this fancy long brisa? We can say it simply from a Mishnah. Rabbi Eliezer Aimer, Haklayim, an animal that is the product of a goat and a sheep mating. Vahatrefa, an animal that is not kosher because of organ problems internally or limb problems externally. Yaitse Daifen, a little shepsel that was born by cutting open the mother and taking it out. Okay, a tumtum, an animal that's a tumtum. Androgynous, an animal that's an androgynous. Lo kedushin, cannot become sanctified. Velo makdishin, and they cannot transfer their sanctity like a tamura to something else. Omar Shmuel, lo kudshin b'tamura, that means it can't be sanctified by making a tamura. Velo makadshin b'yoseh tamura, you can't say, oh, I made a mistake, I sanctified this androgynous shepsel, I'll make another one a tamura on it, and I'll do that one instead. Can't do that, it's just no good. Okay, Shema Mina. So that's the proof that Rebbe Eliezer does not treat animals, and this doesn't, it's just stick to the topic. It doesn't go into all the other stuff with birds. Rebbe Eliezer Aimer, Chayav and Alav, Skil of Zachar. So the Mishnah ended up with Rebbe Eliezer says that a male who has relations with an androgen, Shalo Kadarko, as we figured it out, the both parties are Chayiv Skila. We're going to end up with a very interesting brisa. Tanya, brisa tells us, Omer Rebbe says, when I was a young man, Kishahalachti Lilmud Torah Etzel Rebbe Eliezer ben Shemua, I transferred to Rebbe Eliezer ben Shemua's yeshiva. Chevra of Talmidav Ketarna Goyim Shel Beis Bukya. The other students treated me like Bukya, Ben Bukya's roosters treated a strange rooster. If you put Ben Bukya, and the word Bukya is like a pun on sharp beak. If you put a Schwartz's rooster in with Ben Bukya's roosters, they would peck it to death. Lilmod ela diver velo hanusni, but chanichuni lilmod ela devar echad b'misnisenu. And the only time all the time I was in that yeshiva that they allowed me to say anything in this year was to quote that Mishnah. Rebbe Eliezer Aimer, androgynous chayav and alav skil of Zachar. So I was allowed to say one and only one thing in all my years in that yeshiva, and that was that an androgynous cannot mate with a normal male. Adrenalin. All right, tomorrow you bring volume 3, okay? And we'll pick up at the beginning of the next paragraph. And I apologize for being a little late today, but it wasn't my fault. It was Yossi Chaim's fault.
No Lashon Hara.
I didn't say Lashon Hara.
All Lashon Hara is others.